Good afternoon. Welcome to Trail Talk. I'm
Hello.
Edie,
And I am Mary.
and we are coming to you live from our classroom studio here at the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center in Duncan,
Yes, ma'am.
Oklahoma.
Hot and hot.
It's
Yes.
so hot, but you know what? In here in the Heritage Center, it's cool. So if you're looking
see
for a
it
place to
works.
go hang out and do something fun and beat the heat,
Mm-hmm.
here's the
Spend
place.
some hours.
This
Yep,
is
there you go.
it. We are located at 2150 Chisholm Trail Parkway.
That's right.
Yeah, so come on by. We're here from 10 to 5 every day. Well, Sunday 1 to 5.
There you
Yeah.
go.
I got a little
6 out of
look from
7.
Bailey behind the camera there. Anyway, we rattle on, but we are so glad you guys could join us today. We're going to dig in some more to these first Americans fighting for the US. This has become just like one of those super interesting series.
Right. Series that we've
That,
done.
yeah, that we've done.
Mhm.
And I am just loving all of this information that we're
A lot of
finding
it.
out. What a thread from the Revolutionary War all the way through our
Mhm.
history
Mhm.
of the people, the first Americans. That's what the first Americans right here, living here, and then how they chose sides and participated in
The
these different
reasonings.
wars. Yes, and why?
Mhm.
The big question, why? Why did they
Why
do
would
it?
they do that? Yeah.
And I think the thing that is so I don't know, forgive me for never thinking this through before, but they always felt like their situation would be changed.
Mm.
They felt like by giving back, they would get something in return.
Right. Right.
Besides what they got.
But did they?
Yeah. I think we know.
Not what they were expecting.
Not what they were expecting. So we went last week, we started the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and oh my gosh, I'm blank.
Last week I wasn't.
The Spanish American War is this
Civil
week.
War.
We're at the Civil War.
Was it to the Civil War last?
Maybe it was the French and Indian War, I think. Gosh, I feel okay.
I've slept a lot.
Yeah, forgive me. Go back and watch last week's episode and then you'll know.
Your live
I'm
comment.
gonna have to
make a comment.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch it, I guess. Okay, so the Civil War and the tribes who lived particularly in Indian Territory
Mhm.
at that time,
Mhm.
what present day Oklahoma, the impact that war had on those tribes of people was maybe the most significant.
Right.
It really it changed everything.
Oh,
Everything for them, which
yes.
is a part of the Oklahoma history lessons that we've done
Mhm.
in the past, and just something that we try to teach the students every year whenever they come through here, because it's a very
prominent part of our history.
yes, not just the US history, but Oklahoma's.
Mhm.
So roughly 20,000 American Indians, first Americans, participated in both sides, Confederate and Union
Mhm.
sides of the
Mhm.
Civil War. That's a lot. To me, that sounds like a large number.
It is a lot. I mean, it
I
is.
was a
There's
little
one
surprised.
particular race or
Right,
type
group
of people.
Mhm,
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
So
Especially after their discrimination. The way they were
yes,
treated.
exactly. You know, the removal had happened like 30 plus years before.
Which was, yes, 30 years, but still fresh.
Right, yes, exactly. Well, they're still adjusting to
Mhm.
life, and they have the losses of loved ones
They're
that
still
they
mourning.
incurred and all of that. So and they're trying to adjust to a completely different land,
Lifestyle.
completely
I mean,
different life, yeah,
way of living.
everything was such different. But both group, the people that chose to fight for the Union, those who chose to fight for the Confederacy, both had the same idea in mind.
The reason for being there.
The reason we're gonna choose is because we think this side is going to come out on top,
Okay.
and they're going to show favor to us and
recognition for what we have.
give us back our ancestral lands. And, I mean, we know that that did not ever happen, but they were, fighting in some of the prominent battles, Pea Ridge, Spotsylvania.
Pearl Harbor,
Uh,
Petersburg.
Yeah, but, they were pilots and scouts on gunboats that traveled the Virginia waterways. I mean, some of the first Americans lived there.
Yeah.
Just, a short time before, they knew
I knew that land.
and I mean, what a help that would have been to have them there. The Company K of the first American Michigan sharpshooters consisted of 139 Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi warriors, and they fought with Grant's army at the Wilderness in Spotsylvania. Now, the American Indian men of Company K wanted to enlist earlier, but they had been denied. People did not think that they should be allowed to serve. Now, remember, Native Americans are not
They're not
American
Native
citizens at this
Right.
time. But they thought demonstrating loyalty on the battlefield would be rewarded.
Rewarding in that they would be given US citizenship.
Right, US citizenship, their ancestral lands, I mean, anything.
Right. Some kind of recognition.
Anything, literally. So many of the 5 civilized tribes, we've discussed this before, they lived in the southeastern part of the United States. They lived on farms. Some lived on essentially like a plantation type place, a large farming production place. And they had chosen to own slaves, like the Confederate, many of the people who were fighting for the Confederacy. And so that brought their loyalty to the Confederate side. But 1/3 of all Cherokees and Seminoles in Indian Territory died from violent starvation and war-related illness. 1/3 of those 2 first American Indian tribes died as a result of just the repercussions of the war, not even fighting in the battle.
Right.
So that tells you that even though Indian Territory, it seems like it was kind of way far to the west of all of this, there were Civil War battles that happened right here in Indian Territory. And then just because the government was so busy taking care of all things war related, it was hard to keep up with the promises made with providing for the 5 civilized tribes and the few other tribes that had been removed to Indian Territory. So the starvation, the illness, there was just not attention. There was no time or availability of personnel probably to give the attention needed. Yeah. And so you have huge losses. See, and those are probably not even counted
No.
number of losses in the Civil War. Like those casualties as well. But the westward expansion was still prominent, and after the Union victory, the American Indian Wars, which were kind of happening at the same time, really
Sparked up.
blew up. Yeah, and remember, that's going to be a trail talk all by itself. The American Indian Wars. I think that's going to be an amazing one. But first, I want to show you a slide. This is a pretty well-known photograph from the Civil War. Wounded American Indian sharpshooters are resting beneath this tree in Fredericksburg, Virginia. This is in 1864. 5 days before, these are Michigan sharpshooters were at the Battle of the Spotsylvania Courthouse we mentioned earlier. So the captain is sitting under the tree. He's one of these men seated. This looks like a doctor, perhaps tending to
someone.
an injured soldier. And this is Sergeant his name is Sergeant Thomas. I hope I don't tear up his, Native American name. Neodigishik.
Good job.
Okay, Chitico, he's Chippewa. Okay, Chitico. I don't know. Anyway, Chippewa, Native American, wounded on May the 12th, and he's seen standing here to the right of the tree. Just a great example. These Michigan sharpshooters, there were 139 Native
Right,
Americans from 3 tribes, a part of that group. And then this is a man named Eli Parker. He's from the Seneca tribe, and he was at the Confederate surrender at Appomattox. He was the highest ranking American Indian in the Union Army. He was a lieutenant colonel, and he served as Ulysses S. Grant's secretary. And he drafted the terms of the surrender. What a role! I just think, how important is that? A popular story states that Confederate General Robert E. Lee noticed that Parker was American Indian, remarked, "I'm glad to see one real American here." And Parker shook his hand and said, "We are all Americans." So I think that was a grand gesture, correct, to someone who had lost a terrible war and was surrendering to end the war, not a part of the United States.
Right.
You know, the Confederacy, they formed their own country, their own union.
Right.
And he was saying, no, we are all Americans. I love that. What a great story. Okay, so now we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the Spanish-American War, which started in 1898. I don't think I really ever stopped to consider how many wars actually happened here in the United States.
On ground.
On our soil. Yeah. There were
several.
Yeah.
Thank goodness not
Pretty
current day.
Pretty
Our
bad
present
ones,
day, but-
yeah. Anyway, Native Americans served in the 1st Territorial Volunteer Infantry and 1st Volunteer Cavalry, also known as
The Rough Riders.
the Rough Riders. Teddy Roosevelt, the Rough Riders. If you guys are familiar with our series, or not series, but our lesson for school-age kids about Bud and Temple Abernathy, there's a large part of that story that revolves around Teddy Roosevelt and the boys meet the Rough Riders, the whole shebang.
Which we are going to be teaching.
That's
First session,
right. Yeah,
so.
starting in September, that will be our lesson.
Our focus.
So the Rough Riders were a motley. This is what the information called them, motley.
Motley Crew.
A motley crew, 1,000 men that included, among other Native American people, Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Pawnees. Now, why they volunteered for service in this battle, in this war, is unclear. But one man said that his people had always fought when there was a war, and he could not feel happy to stay at home when the flag was going into battle. So 1898, Native Americans are still not considered U.S. citizens, and yet they are willing to serve.
Which means they're willing to give their life.
Exactly. And they consider themselves, like Mr. Parker said, we are all Americans. Their heart was as devoted as any other person who lived
Born and bred here.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yep.
Anyway, William Pollock, a Pawnee Rough Rider, said, in the memory of our brave fathers, I will try and be like one of them who used to stand single-handed against the foes. Now, by 1898, the American Indian Wars had pretty much ended. Quanah Parker brought his people in like 1875, I believe, to Fort Sill, and they were the very last of the Comanches and probably the last of any of the bands who were left or who were still fighting. So anyway, But yeah, let's take a look. This is a great picture during the Spanish-American War. These are Native American nuns, Native Americans who became nuns, who served as nurses during that war. Now, as nuns, they were probably serving in a mission.
It belonged to
Possibly,
the Congregation of American Sisters.
okay, yeah. Now, there's something about the Spanish-American War that I think is, we should take note of. So, when all of this, well, no, this was all, that was the war that of 1812 that kind of, went into that part. Where, that was, we talked about that last week, where, about 1/3 of Mexican land was taken back. The Comanche and Apache and Kiowa kind of broke treaty with Mexico, and they started attacking. And so the US comes in and they see how weak Mexico has become, and westward expansion was the talk of the day.
Right.
And so they took all that land from Mexico too. Anyway, so these nuns were so beloved by the soldiers and praised by the Surgeon General as the only sisters who came with the army to Cuba and remained there. Yeah, this is, oh yeah, okay, the Spanish-American War, that was Cuba. And the battle of what was that hill? San Juan Hill? Isn't that where Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders took?
Yes, it is.
The
San Juan Hill.
Oh,
turning
okay.
home to
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
Yeah. Anyway, so this was, that was where these women would have been, and how wonderful. I mean, what a risk, right? That they would go all the way to Cuba. That was no easy journey in those days.
Itself, right.
Yeah, not easy today. And then this is, yeah, William Pollock, one of 8 Pawnee to enlist in the Rough Riders, and gallantly fought gallantly during the charge of San Juan Hill. Yeah, he was honored. Get this, when he came back to Oklahoma, his own people honored him in such a way. And I love this because this is 1898. We're not a state yet. There have been a couple of, maybe 3 land runs by this time. And his people honor him by giving him horses, and had a big community gathering for him. I was like, I love that he considered himself a warrior. He considered himself a United States citizen. He went and fought in the war to help the US win. And then he came back, and his people gave him horses, which is a true gift from a Native American cultural standpoint.
They value that.
Yes, and so just kind of that full circle kind of thing of still being able to honor him in a traditional way, and yet what they were honoring him for was a very present day kind of thing. That just the 2 time cultures kind of coming together. Very sadly though. It's horrible. Yeah, just 6 months
After his return.
after returning, he got pneumonia, and he had caught
malaria.
Yeah, he had caught malaria while he was in Cuba, and so he died, and he was only 28 years old. But Roosevelt said that he conferred honor by his conduct not only upon the Pawnee tribe, but upon the American army and nation. And still, they do not become United States citizens.
Yeah.
Still. All right. So now we're going to roll up into World War I. And if you'll remember, talking about the code talkers of World War I, that was kind of what kicked off this series
Right.
of lessons.
Right.
And so some of this will be a little bit of a repeat, but not all of it, because that was a focus on the exhibit that we had.
Right. Yeah.
And our Mike Larson painting and all of that. But so just kind of historically in 1879, so like 10 years or so, 20 years before this particular war was going on. Brigadier General Richard Pratt founded the first Native American boarding school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. If you're familiar, if you've heard us teach about Jim Thorpe, Carlisle was the school where he attended. Pop Warner was the coach where he played football for him. I mean, that's all. Carlisle Indian School is a very well-known, historically speaking. But it was in it was housed in the barracks of the U.S. Army that was in that town or at that location. And Pratt is the man who was famously said, he was kind of responding to something someone else said. He said some other things, but the thing that is most famous is kill the Indian in him and save the man. And that is something that you might even hear Native Americans, First Americans repeating today, because that was a mindset of these schools. We've talked on some lessons before about the Native American schools.
They were treated.
And yeah, and the whole thing was to assimilate them to the culture of the European,
Make them fit into our
white people, yes, and to take their culture, their language, their families in many cases, and yeah, just strip all those things from them so that they don't have that anymore, because
reprogram them.
yeah, reprogramming is a really good word.
Basically what they were trying to do.
And all for I think some people saw it as, oh, we're helping them. This really is to benefit them. It's going to help them because the way they live is so.
See, maybe introducing it to them, but not stripping them of their culture.
Yeah.
Introducing it to them, and so they would be able to survive
Well,
and communicate.
some people,
Right.
others understood it
Yeah.
for a way to have control.
Right.
It was a power move.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly. But so in all, there were like 100 Native American boarding schools across the US, and they were boarding schools on purpose, because once you got the children out of the home, then the likelihood of them using the language or
Right.
playing the
Going back
games,
for
practicing the religion, those things were going to be a lot easier to
control.
yeah, and take away.
Mhm.
So one of the things we talked about on the Code Talker lesson was how the men in the Army were afraid to be overheard
Using their own language.
using their native language, because of how it had been pounded into their heads not to
speak
do
it.
that.
Right.
Yeah. I said pounded in their heads. Sometimes it really
Literally
was a
was.
physical, there was
pounding.
physical punishment for it. But at any rate, we know that,
They were given haircuts, uniforms.
yes, yeah, and they were sent to, boot
Kind
camps.
of like a military setting. It was a
Oh,
military.
the
setting.
schools,
Yeah.
yeah, it was. And then, so when they did join the Army or whatever branch of service, it was a fairly easy transition
Right.
because of the schooling that they had received. But in 1917, World War I, 12,000 Native servicemen signed up, even though 1/3 of the Native population was still not recognized as American citizens by the government. And they thought that by signing up,
It would prove their
it,
patriotism
yeah,
and achieve citizenship.
I mean, how many times? You have to really give the Native American people a huge, I mean, nod is not even pat on the back, those don't even, but just
They tried.
they tried. I mean,
They tried.
time and time and time again, they just wanted to be accepted. At any rate, though, they fought for the US, and we know that, you know, the result of using the code and creating all of that it literally brought an end to the First World War in a matter of probably 2 weeks or less.
Mhm.
Once they
Right,
started,
yeah.
it was literally 2 weeks or less. So there were. Let's see if I've got, oh no, I'm gonna go, well, I'll just leave it here. So this is a picture, this is Joseph Oklahoma. And he was one of the I don't know, greatest, bravest, maybe, men to fight in the, during the battles of World War One. This is just before the Code Talkers started.
Greatest heroes.
Yeah, one of the hero, that's good. He went, in October of 1918, so he didn't even arrive until the month before the war was over. The Armistice Day was November 11th of 1918. He and his company were caught off behind enemy lines. They came across a German machine gun nest. He and 23 soldiers rushed the enemy's position. They captured a German machine gun and turned it on the enemy, and they were pinned down for 4 days before 171 German soldiers eventually surrendered. And he was awarded the World War I Victory Medal, a Silver Citation Star for his bravery, and France even awarded him the Croix de Guerre, which is a French war
Awarded.
war. I don't know what honor, I guess, medal. A
Kind
medal.
of medal.
Yeah. Yeah, and so he is very well known, came back to Oklahoma and went back to his normal life. He didn't want
Any
any,
kind of notoriety or
no,
praise
no,
or.
he wasn't about that. Now, this is Edith Montour. She was the first Native Canadian registered nurse. Indian Act restrictions prevented her from pursuing professional training in Canada. So at this point, Canada was mistreating the Native Americans just as much as the US. But she came to the US where she did receive nurses training. And at the age of 27, she volunteered for the US Medical Corps and served in a hospital in France and treated soldiers who had been shot and gassed. She was the only Native woman among the 14 Canadian nurses who served in the US Army Nurse Corps during World War I. So worth mentioning. I know she's not from the US, but she is a Native American woman who
The only one.
and considered what was happening. She
Right.
found a way to help. Yeah, and she went and served.
Fast.
I mean,
she wanted to do.
She wasn't on the front line, but they were never far from the front line
Right.
over
And
there.
you needed all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Conditions
Mhm.
were pretty rough. So the legacy of the Code Talkers and all of the Native Americans, leading up to this point, but particularly the Code Talkers, prompted, as things began stirring again in Europe, the Germans were so puzzled still by the code that they were unable to break, that they began, they sent spies and agitators to sabotage future Code Talkers and limit Native American enlistment. They feared the Native Americans being a part of the war again so much, which I just think I think that is awesome. But despite the success and show of patriotism, it wasn't until 1924 that Congress granted citizenship to all Native Americans, and it was in part due to the enlistment of those who fought in World War I. World War I ended in 1918, not till 1924. It was 6 years later.
And then it wasn't until 75 till the tribes regained their full civil rights.
Yeah,
The Indian self-determination.
1975.
So 50 years later.
Yeah. The Navajo Code Talkers were not honored for their service until the year 2000. And then in 2008, legislation was passed to honor the Choctaw and other Native soldiers, the Congressional Gold Medal.
Which is now on display.
So it took a minute for
Are they
our
still
government, to come around. I'm sure they weren't. I mean, anyway, so a lot. It's a lot, it's so much. But just the pride and the determination.
Steadfast.
Yeah.
Digging their
and
heels in.
their motivation to be seen, to be recognized,
To be equal.
and to be equal, to be a part of. We take for granted so much, and these Native Americans have done nothing but fight since the first contact
What would
by
we have done?
Europeans.
You know,
Yeah. So, anyway, we still have more of these lessons to go. So we're gonna do those, but we're gonna take a little break. Next week, we won't have trail talk at all. And the following week, we're gonna do a couple of fun projects because our Cowpokes and Wranglers program is starting up the second Monday in September
11th.
September the 11th. And so we're very excited. So we're going to let you guys see a couple of the things that we're going to be
Mary
doing.
loves to do projects.
Oh.
Mary gets messy.
Yeah, we're going to have a good old time. Now, tomorrow, we do have a special guest. Gerald Swanson will be here to tell us everything, updates, successes from last year from the Rowdy Swanson
This is
bull
the
riding. Third annual, is coming up. And so be sure and tune in, find out everything you need to know, everything you want to know about the event, and how you can get tickets, and how you can support this really worthy cause. So we're looking forward to seeing Gerald tomorrow and at 3 o'clock.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in today, guys. We'll see you.
Happy trails.